So you're welcome to this reflection for the third week of Advent. And this time of year, there's a lot of darkness around. Every morning when we wake up, it's dark and we don't see light really until about 9 o'clock. And then the day is dark and dreary and you never feel until it is evening and darkness falls again. But at that time, I usually go out for a walk around darkness time as it's getting dark. And I love to walk around and look at the lights that are coming on, the lights on the Christmas trees in the houses and in the gardens. And that sort of gives me hope that one day there'll be better light coming in the near future. But also it gives me hope about the light of Christ that's shining on us at this time. Christ has come at Christmas time, and that is the center of this season as well. But when I look at those lights also, it reminds me that sometimes I take this light for granted and I don't appreciate all this light and how important it is around about me. And just an example I have was when I was in Zambia, just after going to Zambia in the year 2000, a few of us decided we'd like to take a trip to a mine. And we got an organized tour of a mine, and we went down a shaft for about 1.4 kilometers. And then the guide said to us, now we will get out here, we have to get out here. And we walked around the tunnels in darkness, but we were given helmets with a light on top. And those lights were showing us the way. We had depended totally on them. But he said, now we reached a junction. And he said, now we'll stop here and please turn off your lights. So we all turned off our lights. And he said, now, please put your hand up to your face and look at your hand and see at what point can you see your hand. And we brought our hand right up to our nose, and we couldn't even see our hand at our nose. So he told us, now put on your lights again. And so we put on our lights, and he says, I'd like to hear what was your experience? What do you think? So I shared that my experience was that this light I often take for granted. I didn't realize that you cannot see even your hand an inch away from you. So that's one of the lessons I learned when I look at these lights on the street and the houses and in the Christmas trees. It's a gift from God that He gave us at creation. And then I think of the light of Christ is also a gift from God. And I think the same way we sometimes, like going around the mine in the darkness, you wouldn't see anything. In our lives also, going around life, we're trudging sometimes without using the light of Christ. And an example of it is all these wars and disturbances in the world, and this war in Ukraine and the war in Gaza and Israel is a typical example. We're trying to get an answer how to solve this war, and there must be another way, and that way is the way of Christ. And you know, I was listening to another interview only the past few days from an Israeli man who was his parents were killed on the October the 7th attack in Gaza, and these people were advocates for the Palestine people. And they fought for justice and peace for the Palestinians, and yet they were killed. But this man was asked, what are you asking for now for the Middle East? He says, I am crying, he said. That's the word he used, so that there will be peace. And they're crying that there will be a stop to the violence. And that was an example of somebody looking for another way apart from an eye for an eye, an eye for an eye. And so there's three people that stand out for me who used the alternative, the way of Christ, rather than the eye for an eye method. For example, Mother Teresa, she was going along in Calcutta one day with a small child who was hungry, and she took the child into a baker, and she said, can you give me something for the hungry child? He spat in her face, and she said, thank you for the gift. Now, can you give me something for the child? So she responded with non-violence. And the same was true of Desmond Tutu. He was going on a passageway in Johannesburg, and the road was muddy. So there was a plank on the road, and he was walking on that plank, and he saw coming towards him a white man. And the white man shouted to him, there was only room for one of them, he shouted, "Get off that plank, I don't make way for gorillas." And Tutu just stepped off and says, "I do," and he let him pass. And so then the third example of non-violence and that achieved great things was Pope John Paul II. When he was saying Mass in the big square in Warsaw in 1979, there were over 100,000 people present, and also the communist regime, the leaders were there. And in the middle of his homily, the people began to chant, "We want God, we want God." And after 15 minutes, it continued. And so the Pope just sat down, and then he gestured to the authorities. You see, this is what the people want. And in that way, we know that in a short time afterwards, the government fell and there was a new regime there. It's not good enough for me, though, to suggest that governments and government leaders accept the light of Christ. I have to accept it also in my own life. And the light of Christ challenges me to forgive when I might like to do the opposite. It challenges me to love when it might be easier to hate or to hurt somebody. And it thirdly challenges me to offer kindness to somebody that I might be trying to avoid. The thing that I learned then from this season of Advent is that we sometimes take the light of Christ for granted, and that we need that light to guide us, and we need that light especially during this time of darkness when there's so much trouble in the world. And so my prayer is now that the light of Christ will be a guide for you and for me during this time of darkness, during this season, but also for you and for families who may be going through any dark time. If there's anything like grief or sadness or worry or anxiousness that you are experiencing, that you will allow the light of Christ to penetrate you and to give you peace. So have a happy Advent.